about the I don't know if it was the fire chief or the spokesperson for the fire department was talking about how they were afraid the building was going to collapse. She mentioned that somebody asked that question. They said, yes, we were afraid of that because we've seen this happen in the past.
Exactly. Until 9/11, they don't collapse. Now there's a little fire. They go, oh, it will collapse.
And she was talking about it as though it was plural. This has happened many times before.
Yeah. Yes, only on 9/11, but now all the science has changed. They've changed insurance of buildings now. They believe a Bic lighter burns down steel buildings.
I mean,
well, we were joking that steel is softer than wood.
Yeah,
but I mean, want to make your point? Go ahead.
So so listening to her say that they pulled and I guess they have some new procedure built in for that contingency because they pull everybody back and they do a defensive fire and especially if they didn't think people were inside. And from the last report that I heard, there's only one person that was unaccounted for, and they weren't sure if that person even went into work that day.
Guys, I want you to put the article up on screen. Source, FBI knew Austin attack was coming. Dallas office dispatched agents yesterday afternoon to be on the ground in Austin. This is big. And then you've got the other KXAN TV reporting basically the same thing about them already having fire trucks and police. Do people realize the magnitude of this piece of information? We've got to get this out day one. We've got to start investigation now. We've got to have more witnesses. We've got to follow this because they're in the news saying we're going to start shutting down the small airports. You can't let people not go through body scanners to get in their own planes. You can't have slaves doing that. After all, major cities are saying ban gardens. People might grow pot. You can't have slaves having their own gardens. Corporate media blames kamikaze attack on Tea Parties. It's all over the news. I said hour one that if it's big and promoted and if they're already ready and organized and say it's the Tea Parties, get ready. It's a staged event. I got some emails, saw some websites. Oh, look at Jones saying it's Austin and it's a staged event. Ridiculous. It's a heart attack. And then, well, he's right about that, but still screw him. The governor isn't after him. Nobody knows who he is. This is really going on. I mean, this is real, folks. This affects everybody. They love to stage events against themselves, not just to scare the public into submission, but to create the culture of paranoia in the feds of the public's your enemy. And you've got to, this is a psyop. And I'm pretty sure this is staged in my gut, which is never wrong, unfortunately. But we've got to continue to follow the intellectual evidence and the scientific evidence and the journalistic evidence. And I just go with the facts. And he could be a lone nut, but everything points towards it being staged. And you see Texas about to lead the country towards states' rights. You see the staged attacks on Medina. Jason Douglas, your comments on this. I want your real opinion. Give me your real opinion. Working here a year, seeing all this, seeing me say they're going to attack Austin. You watch the next attack, Austin. Could be an attack on a building, could be a plane. It's confirmed federal informants are trying to provocateur people into bombing Brave New Books. This is real.
Yeah. All you can do really is there's so many different perspectives you have to look at the world in when you're looking through the InfoWars perspective. But the thing that really struck me was, and I was in the gaggle of journalists at the site, and they just kept going, I can't believe how fast this information is coming out. They were perplexed as to how they came up with this information so fast. And the last time I remember that happening was 9/11. It's just, how do they...
Wait a minute. You were with journalists, and they in Austin were like, how do they already know all this?
Right. Yeah. And that they're divulging it already. And then how careful...
Because normally they'll make you wait 6 weeks to find out if it's not... when it's not staged, like the shooting at the Capitol, the guy shooting the gun, that didn't get any traction. Real stuff gets ignored.
Yeah, that barely made the news.
Continue. That's key, what you just said.
Yeah, so they were flabbergasted as to how...
Now, break it down. Where you were, the groups of media. I know you won't know their names. We have video of all this, but what they were saying.
Yeah, it was all the major groups. Fox was there. CNN was there. They were local people that were, hired out, but that's what they were making comments on, how fast the information was being disseminated. And then I noticed that the press crew that came up, Acevedo and Leffingwell, they made it really clear that this was not a terrorist act. But then to know that all the headlines are, making these Tea Party connections. So it's almost as if,
they do that to gain credibility. Right. Like, oh, we're waiting.
Right.
But then, but then an hour later, oh, it is a attack. And, take your guns. Don't worry.
So it just seems like it's going through all the propaganda channels.
But the media was saying, how do they know this so early?
Yep. Well, the people there, they're not reporting it. They're just
no. But describe it. You see reporters behind cameras, people talking, pads of paper.
Oh yeah, we're all pressed in because that's how it is at those moments. You're trying to interview one person, and there's 60 media people on the side, and so you're all pressed in together. And I just hear all these comments. Where are they getting this information so fast? How come this is happening so fast? And it did. It just seemed like they were pouring out all of this information, but usually you're a lot more reticent to say anything, especially when you're in an official role. But then Acevedo kept making comments like, irresponsible reporters who were saying that it wasn't his plane or it was his, no one can make conjecture, but.
Well, he does that to be the authority. That Acevedo, he's something else.
Yeah, they're just planting little seeds.
So how many reporters, roughly? I mean, they were saying, how do they know so quick? What, so they were suspicious?
Yeah, there was probably 25. There was more when I was there, because that's when the press crew first came out. So
I'm going to do something. Instead of being interrupting, I want free flow. I did this with Ike today. I'm going to walk out for 5 minutes, and I'm going to come back to you. I want you guys to just talk about whatever you want right now. Go ahead.
Well, one quick thing. I just want... I hope the people out there just say a prayer for Joe's wife and daughter, because it sounds like they were in the house when it was put on fire, and they got out and were taken away. So I feel really bad for them, and and then knowing Joe, I'm really finding it hard to believe that Joe did this, and that could be just me, from knowing the guy. And other than that, taking the personal element out of it, the neighbors, I thought it was interesting that the neighbors didn't really know the guy at all.
I thought it was interesting that they wouldn't even come to the door.
Yeah.
I mean, if something like that happened, I'd want to be sharing it with somebody.
Right. Or he was a great guy, or he was a mean guy, or whatever. You'd think you'd want to be, telling people. And it was really hard to get neighbors to talk. Only one guy would talk with us on camera, and he was the guy that called 911. So at least he thinks he was the first guy from his opinion. So that would be interesting to find out if he was the first guy that actually called 911, or if it was somebody else, because he thought it was that they got there really quickly, because he was praising them for how fast they arrived on scene for the house fire at
that's all you keep on hearing on how fast the response time was. And I mean, 5 minutes during a fire can seem like a lot, but that's pretty quick.
That depended on where
to come in,
where the department is. But it was very very weird typing up Joe's name in the search engine and just seeing that picture, because that
that was haunting you all day, and you kept making the music association saying, is he a jazz musician? I mean, I know him.
Yeah, from somewhere. And it's and I hadn't seen him in a couple years, but he, when I knew him. And I talked to a guy after I found that out. I called a guy that I knew him very well, and he'd seen him about 2 weeks ago. They were exchanging microphones because they were each doing different types of recording. So, but he said, out of everybody that he knew, Joe always seemed to have his stuff together compared to other musicians. And when you're in Austin, musicians usually don't have their stuff together. They're, a ragtag bunch. But Joe always was clean cut, dressed neat. And, maybe that's, if he was some sort of double agent or some sort of agent, then, I never saw it